Hi, this is the beginning of my week 2 vlog. Today I'll be discussing my thoughts after the Robbie Davidson lecture, which have also sort of culminated from the lectures of David Boss and Gert Heckma's lectures as well. The feeling I'm feeling right now after all of these lectures is disappointed in Amsterdam. I've been taught that is the most sexually liberal place in the world, and it's not in the sense of the word that I think we are used to and that we say, and the definition I think you've been pushing us to realize. So for me, being sexually liberal is talking about it and not having it be a secret, not having it be taboo, and that's not what I'm seeing as I see a district that is separate and alone and in itself privately tucked away for prostitution, and the sex shops are only there, and that it's not liberal in the dictionary sense of the word either. So the Oxford English Dictionary defines it as willing to respect or accept behavior or opinion different from one's own, open to new ideas. Specifically, a subset of the definition is favorable to or respectful of individual rights and freedoms. And while we have discussed that, yes, Amsterdam, the Netherlands government and people are tolerable, they are by no means favorable for it. So I think I'm beginning to understand why you are pushing against us using that word liberal, because while they have marriage open to same-sex couples, they're not continuing with the sense of the word liberal. They're not favorable to trans identities or people or bi, and we can see that as there is no visibility for bi or trans here at all. I did see one trans flag the other day, so that was cool, like hanging out of a shop. But so I think, yeah, like I said, I've been very disappointed. On a similar note, we haven't discussed a current feminist movement at all. I believe someone asked Mr. Davidson today what happened to those gay movements, and like those, I haven't heard any of feminist movements currently either. So I'm missing the action, and I want to know why there isn't still movements strong and visible, and that we're learning about as a sexual politics class, that are still fighting for trans visibility, bi visibility, pan, and women's rights in general. Why isn't that a thing? But I think my biggest thought after today's discussion is, yes, I am disappointed with the entire movement and liberalism in Amsterdam. Hi, today is Wednesday. We had our debriefing discussion today where we talked about pedophilia and went over how to vlog. Before I talk about either of those, or just the first part, I want to backtrack on something I said yesterday, even though it is not the Reflections blog. I discussed how I was disappointed in the lack of sexual discussion here. But then I went to the Nemo today and I saw the teen facts section for sex ed, and that was really cool that it was out in the open. I mean, there were kids very young in the museum itself, and so to have that even in the same building as those small kids was definitely much more forward-thinking than we have in America. So I would like to backtrack a little of what I said yesterday and give more credit to Amsterdam than I did originally. Moving on to today, we discussed how, if pedophilia fits under the queer umbrella, I believe was the word you had written down, and if it even should. And first, I feel like we've been using the word queer a lot, which I normally don't do. I find it odd, not to say, but that we are using it so freely, because traditionally I will never call a person or their actions or their sexuality queer unless they have expressed that identity themselves, just because it does have such a heavy stigma and meaning. It's very specific meaning to it. So the fact that we've been using that word a lot is sort of confusing me, I guess, because isn't it that I feel like it's unfair to assign the identity to gay and lesbian and bi and trans and everyone, individuals that don't use the identity queer. So that's just been toying in my mind a little bit after today's discussion. I want to talk more about who falls underneath the queer or LGBT plus umbrella. As we discussed today, I'm wondering if some people, like Lainey mentioned that sexuality is about gender, and it was my first point I made in class, and I want to explore it a little more. Could there then be two umbrellas? Could there be a gender sexuality umbrella? Ooh, it's really close. And could there also be a kind of sexual relationship umbrella that could include the dynamics, power and otherwise, the styles of sex? So specifically, you have your sexuality with lesbians and gays, where they like whoever who are attracted to certain genders, and that's one umbrella in their identity. That's one facet. And could you have another that is polyamorous, kinky, fetish, and different kind of role playing? If you're specifically going to avoid pedophilia for the time being, if you're specifically attracted to older individuals or individuals of authority, that is a separate umbrella. My one issue with that is where would trans fall, because I'm specifically talking about sexuality, and that would dismiss the trans identity and simply put them as gay, lesbian, bi, straight, pan, ace, or aro. So then you would need a third umbrella, for cis and trans, and everyone in between and outside. So again, is that queer, right? So I guess my question is, should we start making more umbrellas if members of the LGBT communities don't want certain non-normative identities and attractions in their umbrella? Because I think that's fair to them. The LGBT communities are not the feminist movement. Their goal is not to end oppression for everyone, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I'm aware, excuse me. So should we just make new umbrellas? I guess that is the question I'll be toying with. Hopefully I will have a better answer for you in my concluding segment vlog.
Hi, we're in Brussels. We had our meeting with the Secretariat of the LGBT Intergroup today. I still find it fascinating that he is their only staff. That seems a little absurd, but he said it wasn't that much work, so I guess I'll trust him. My first impression after leaving was how frustrating it must be for that intergroup to deal with places like Chechnya, where they know they have to do something, but that it won't matter, that Chechnya won't listen, and it's very hard to, one, deal with governments like that, two, know that you can't do much to help dying people. I found today's meeting particularly fascinating because I do want to go into lobbying or some kind of policy making, influencing for reproductive rights, specifically sex ed. But that will, whatever I do in the future, will obviously work with LGBT rights groups. And so I found it fascinating the way that he got to that position so easily, and luckily he said it was mostly luck. But to go from an internship to the secretariat of the LGBT intergroup, maybe it's not as prestigious as a job as I think it is, but I would kill for that job. So that was really cool to me. I wish we had learned a little more exactly about how it is they do what they do, how the members of parliament divide up their time. So, you know, what amount of their time is devoted to the LGBT intergroup, and how many other intergroups are there, what else are they doing, and what exactly are they doing? Because we heard about who they are and their positions, and we learned about what the intergroup does as a whole, but I would like to know the general breakdown of what the members do versus what he does, and I just didn't think of that question soon enough in the presentation. Brussels in general, I am finding very interesting. It sort of seems like a European New York City in that every couple blocks just changes drastically, but specifically the area that the EU was in was very much like the business part of Midtown, which I thought was funny. What I have found so far is that it's insanely diverse, and again, that parallels New York. There's so many different kinds and colors and ages of people here, and I've been really trying to look at the divisions of that, and I haven't found any yet, but we will see as the weekend goes on, because I will be staying here in Brussels and heading to Bruges. What I would also like to know, another thing, but I couldn't ask him this, was how much do they actually get done? What really is their influence? And why aren't they looking for more members? He said it wasn't of great interest right now. They have a lot, they have a great percentage of parliament, except not total tolerance, and there's, like he said, there is not no discrimination. So I just feel like in the off session, send some more emails that members won't open. At least you're, trying more. I really liked the tour today, specifically that street art. Right before we went back to the hotel, I found beautiful and breathtaking. I would have liked to know a little bit more about why that is the gay street. If it's just like gay families live there, but then their children grow up and they're not always gay. So how is it the gay street? Is it just sort of how what's it called in New York? Is it just like how the Greenwich Village used to be the gay neighborhood? I would just like to have known a little bit more about that. I also did ask her about Jewish history there, just because I'm very curious, and she did give me a lot of information. But I thought the tour was very beautiful and very informative as to the history of Brussels growth. I look forward to the rest of my weekend here.
This week I talked about my disappointment with the liberal safe haven culture that is portrayed to us of Amsterdam. I talked about the queer umbrella, and I talked about Brussels. I'd like to clarify one point from my second video, which is that I don't object to using the word queer. I object to using it as a general word for the LGBT community. I know it has been taken back, but I also know LGBT people that don't use that term and don't like it. So that was what I meant by using, but my abstaining from using it to generalize the communities. But I want to talk a little bit more about my three umbrella idea. I tried to compare it to the only group I really know how, which is Judaism. I'm Jewish, if you haven't already gotten that. So I don't like Orthodox Jews. A lot of Reform and conservative Jews don't. They give Israel a bad name. They vote for Republicans because for some reason they think that they're going to be better for Israel when they're not. And they look down on me as Reformed, but that's sort of different. Anyway, we don't want the Orthodox Jews in our name. We don't want, when you say Jew, to think of the curly payas and the big hats, because that is not who we are, and we don't subscribe to all of their same beliefs. We are much more forward-thinking than them. But the point is that we don't want them in our name and in our group, and yet they are anyway. And I think about why, and it's because we need them for numbers. They do make us stronger and more visible. Having that face gives us a face to recognize at all. So I think I was relaying that into the counter argument. I'm not sure if I agree with it, but my counter argument to the 3 umbrellas would be you need force in numbers. I'm still a little unsettled on the entire idea about members, about people who are non-normative, that aren't accepted into the community, but want to be, and about those members that have worked so hard to establish a movement that is now getting people they don't necessarily represent or want to represent. So it's a very big conflict I don't know the answer to. Obviously, no one does. In my disappointment video, I discussed how the feminist movement has dissolved, or how I haven't heard anything about it, and it made me realize I would like to learn more about global feminism in general. The gender and health major at Michigan is divided into multiple thematic classes, and I've been avoiding global feminization, but mostly because it's health related, and I find the ones in America more specific to what I want to do. But I would love to learn more about how the feminist movements have risen and designed themselves across the country. The way we have learned feminism so far, it makes it seem like it was completely America's idea and we were the only ones doing it. And I can't even say if that's true or not because I know that little. So that is the thing I want to learn next in my feminist studies, I believe. I am taking a global class this upcoming semester. Anyway, last week I think I said I wanted to try waffles, fries, and something else. The fries were very disappointing. Right off the bat, not crispy nor seasoned. So next week I will still try for waffles, and I think that's my main goal. I'm not gonna go too far else.